You have noticed this in yourself, Capricorn, even if you have never said it in plain language. The relationship you have with the Father, not a particular father, but the whole architecture of fathers, of authority, of the men who built the world you walked into, does not close the way it closes in the people you grew up alongside. Your friends seem to finish with their fathers somewhere in their 20s. They came to terms, they forgave, or they moved on, or they made the relationship into a small chapter of a larger life. You watched this happen around you, and you noticed, quietly, that for you, the relationship did not close. It stayed open. It went underground for years sometimes, but it did not finish. It came back at 35, at 45, in forms you did not predict, asking the same structural question it had asked you at 12. This is not because something is broken in you. This is because the father relationship operates differently in a Saturn-ruled body. And tonight, I am going to show you the architecture of why through one of the oldest stories ever written down. There is a story from Sumer. It is older than the Greek myths, older than the Roman ones, older than anything in the Hebrew Bible. It comes from the cities of Mesopotamia in the 3rd millennium before the Common Era, when the people who lived between the two rivers were the first humans to write stories down on clay. The story tells of a god named Enlil, whose name means Lord of the Wind, or Lord of the Air, or Lord of the Sky. Translations vary, but the figure is unmistakable. Enlil was the first of the great gods, the father of the pantheon, the one who separated the sky from the earth at the beginning of time, so that there would be a space for living things to exist between them. Before Enlil, the sky and the earth were pressed together, and there was no room. Enlil took the sky in his hands and lifted it up, and the world began. Enlil was not a kind god. He was not cruel, exactly, but he was not warm. The Sumerian texts describe him as distant, severe, holding decrees that the lesser gods had to obey and that the humans had no recourse against. When Enlil spoke, his words had the weight of the structural order itself. They could not be argued with. They could not be talked down. They could not be moved by tears. Enlil established the laws that held the world apart from chaos. He set the boundaries between what could be and what could not be. And his sons, the lesser gods who came after him, and eventually the human race itself, lived under the architecture that Enlil had built, and the architecture did not negotiate. This is not a story about a particular bad father. This is the original picture of what the Sky Father is. The cosmic authority that builds the structure, sets the limits, holds the weight of the order, and does not enter into intimate conversation with those who live under that order. The Sumerians knew 4,000 years ago that there is a kind of authority which operates by structural weight rather than by a warm communication. They gave it a name and a story. The name was Enlil. The story is the one we still live inside, whether we know it or not. You are Capricorn. You are ruled by Saturn. Saturn, in the older astrology, is the planet of structural authority, the celestial expression of exactly the principle that the Sumerians put into Enlil. The Babylonian astronomers who came after the Sumerians, building on the same tradition, identified Saturn as the heavenly body that carried the Enlil principle into the sky. To be Saturn-ruled, in that older understanding, was to be a son of Enlil, to be born under the particular weight of the Sky Father, to live your life in conscious relationship with the structural architecture, and to carry that relationship in your body in a way that other signs do not. This is your blueprint. The myth is not a metaphor. The myth is the precise diagram of the relationship you have been having with the father archetype your whole life, whether your biological father was kind or harsh or absent or present. The biological father is a particular instance of the larger archetype. The archetype itself, the sky father, Enlil, Saturn, is what your body has been in relationship with since before you were born, and the relationship does not end with your biological father. The mechanics work like this. A Capricorn body is calibrated from birth to Saturn's signal. The way other signs receive light from Venus or impulse from Mars, you receive structure from Saturn. Structure arrives through the channel that the father archetype occupies in your specific life. Sometimes through a biological father who incarnated the architecture well. Sometimes through a biological father who incarnated it poorly. Sometimes through an absent father whose absence itself transmitted the architecture. Sometimes through a mother or a teacher or a coach or an older sibling who carried the father function in the chart. Whoever carried the function itself is structural, and the structure is what you are calibrated to receive. What I am giving you here is the architecture of the father relationship, the Enlil mechanics by which a Capricorn body is shaped by structural authority across the whole of its life. Knowing the architecture is awareness. Knowing the timing of when in your specific decade the father archetype is most active in your life, the years when the relationship intensifies, the years when it goes quiet, the seasons when it asks new questions of you, is power, because it allows you to meet the work the relationship is asking for at the right time rather than at the wrong one. That timing is what I track on the Patreon. The foundation tier maps the weekly mechanics of the father archetype as it operates in a Capricorn body. The inner circle tier breaks the activation down by your decade, because the wound operates at different angles in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, and your 50s. Now that you have the Enlil frame, you will see the father archetype operating in places that have nothing to do with your biological father at all. You will see it in your relationship with bosses. Even when the boss is warm, even when the boss is competent, even when the boss is good to you, you cannot quite stop reading the boss as Enlil. You watch for the structural signal under the warmth. You notice when the boss is operating from architecture and when the boss is operating from personality. The reading is not paranoia. The reading is the inherited diagnostic instrument of a son of Enlil, calibrated to detect whether the authority in the room is real or performed. You will see it in your relationship with institutions, the law, the government, the bureaucracy, the systems of credentials and licenses and approvals. Other people experience institutions as inconveniences. You experience institutions as the visible part of Enlil's architecture, and you have a complex feeling about them. Respect for the structural function, irritation with the human imperfection of the people who staff them, and a deep underlying recognition that the institution and you are made of the same Saturn stuff. You will see it in your relationship with mentors and elders. When you meet someone older who has carried the father function well, who built something, who held the weight, who did the work that lasted, you respond with a particular kind of attention that other signs do not have available to them. You are not looking to be parented. You are looking to verify that the architecture continues to be carried by adults. And the verification, when it arrives, gives you a specific relief. and you will see it in your own work. The work you have built across your life is in part your contribution to the Enlil architecture. Your attempt to build something that holds, something that does not need to be talked into being real, something that meets the standard the Sky Father set before you arrived. This is not pathology. This is filial labor. You are not trying to please your father. You are trying to participate in the architecture that the father figure has always represented. And the participation is one of the deepest forms of meaning available to a Capricorn life. What you have called your father wound was not exactly a wound. The wound metaphor is borrowed from a different psychology, one that assumes the goal is to heal the relationship and close it. Your relationship with the father archetype is not a wound to be closed. It is an open architecture you live inside, the way Enlil's sons lived inside the world he separated from chaos. The relationship stays open because the architecture is alive, and the architecture is alive because Saturn is still the planet of the structural order, and Saturn is not finished with you. The openness is not failure. The openness is the form filial relationship takes inside a sign whose patron is the Sky Father himself. Place your hand on your shoulders, Capricorn. Feel where the muscles of the upper back meet the neck. Feel where they are tighter than they should be, where they have been holding the structural weight you absorbed before you had any name for it. That tightness is the inheritance registered in your tissue. Your shoulders have been the carrying place. The medical name for the muscle is the trapezius, the bearer of the yoke, and that is exactly what it has been doing your whole life, bearing the yoke of architectural inheritance, the weight that Enlil set down on his sons and that the sons carried, and that your particular shoulders have been carrying since before you could speak. This is not weight as punishment. This is endurance as design, the load-bearing musculature of a body that was assembled to participate in the father architecture across its whole life. The years you spent feeling the weight without knowing what to call it were the years your shoulders were doing the filial work that nobody around you had language for. You have been the son of Enlil since long before you had a frame for what that means. The frame, when it arrives, is simply the shoulders admitting in words what they have been doing in geometry for a long time. The relationship is not the problem. The relationship is the architecture, and the architecture is alive, and you live inside it as Enlil's sons always have. What your shoulders have been carrying, the myth has merely caught up to. The Sumerians, when they finished telling the story of Enlil, did not end with reconciliation. They did not end with the sons forgiving the father. They ended with the sons taking their places within the architecture and continuing the building. The myth knows that the relationship between the Sky Father and his sons is not meant to close. The relationship is meant to be carried, generation by generation, by the sons who recognize the architecture and take their place within it. You are not meant to close this relationship. You are meant to carry it. The Patreon tracks when the architecture is most active in your specific life. The seasons when the father archetype asks for new work from you. The seasons when it goes quiet. The windows when the inheritance shifts and the next portion of the architecture asks to be carried. The architecture you carry forever. The seasonal weight of it I track on Patreon, week by week and decade by decade. The myth knows. You know too now, in a way you did not know before. The shoulders that have been carrying have a name for what they carry. The wound that stayed open was not a wound. The relationship that did not close was not failure. The architecture is the inheritance. The inheritance is alive. And you, Capricorn, are doing exactly what the sons of Enlil were always going to do. Master Alistair, only Capricorn, only depth.